When Michael died, the house didn't go silent all at once. It happened piece by piece, like the world was slowly erasing him. First, it was the sound of his keys hitting the bowl by the door. Then, the morning coffee machine. Quiet. Then his laugh, still echoing in my head, but fading every day. I remember the day after the funeral. Everyone went home. People had filled the house with flowers, condolences, and half-drunk glasses of wine they left behind. But when the door finally closed, and I stood in the living room surrounded by empty cups and his favorite jacket hanging over the chair, I realized the quiet had teeth. It bit. I didn't know what to do with myself. His toothbrush was still by the sink, his cologne half full. I sprayed it on his pillow that night, desperate to sleep beside something that still smelled like him. My lungs burned with grief, but I couldn't stop breathing him in. For 17 years, Michael had been my anchor, the calm voice when the world shook. I thought I knew every part of him, the way he folded his napkin after dinner, the way he'd hum old country songs while fixing the porch light. Now, all those tiny habits had become relics, frozen in place, like the museum of a man who used to exist. The week after, people kept telling me, "He's in a better place." But where exactly is that? Because it sure isn't here, and it sure isn't with me. Then one morning, a call came from a law office. A calm woman's voice said, "Mrs. Rivers, we'll need you present for the reading of your husband's will. Tomorrow, at 10. Her tone was polite, almost indifferent, like she hadn't just dropped a grenade in my chest. I remember staring at the phone long after she hung up, thinking, what could he have possibly left behind to organize? We didn't have much. The house, the car, a modest account we built together. I thought that call would be simple, maybe even comforting, a chance to close one last chapter of our shared story. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying that small detail, how calm her voice was, how mechanical. Something about it didn't sit right. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe grief just makes you paranoid. Still, when morning came, I caught myself standing in front of the mirror, clutching my wedding ring like a lifeline. I looked tired, brittle, older than I remembered being. My eyes seemed frightened of something they hadn't yet seen. And deep down, I felt a strange pulse of dread, like the silence in the house was about to speak back. If you've ever lost someone and felt the walls closing in with their absence, like this video, so I know I'm not alone. The law office smelled like paper and old coffee, the kind of smell that makes you feel small, like every decision made there could quietly rewrite your life. I sat on one side of a polished desk, hands gripping my purse like a shield. Across from me sat Mr. Hall, the family lawyer we'd known for years. He looked older, grayer, and uncomfortably polite. When he greeted me, he didn't quite meet my eyes. "Elena," he said softly, "thank you for coming." I nodded, unable to speak. My throat burned. On his desk, there was a folder embossed with Michael's name. I stared at it, waiting for him to open it, and felt my heart crawl into my chest like it was trying to hide from what was inside. He started reading in that formal tone lawyers use, detached and clean. I, Michael Rivers, being of sound mind and body. The words felt wrong. How could someone dead sound so alive? So deliberate, so distant. He mentioned small things first. His wedding band, the watch his father gave him, a few sentimental items. I was barely listening. I just wanted it to end, to sign whatever needed signing and go home. But then he paused. I'll never forget that pause. He cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and said, "And the remainder of my estate, including the family home at 43 Meadow Lane, is to be transferred in full to Ms. Clara Evans." The words crashed into me like a wave that didn't stop. "Who?" I said, before I even realized I'd spoken out loud. Mr. Hall looked up, startled. "Ms. Evans," he repeated quietly, as stated in the will. I laughed. It came out sharp, broken. There must be some mistake. Michael he wouldn't leave our house to a stranger. The lawyer sighed, his eyes softening in that pitiful way people look at you when they wish they could make something easier. I've double-checked the document myself, he said. It's all properly signed, legally binding. My mind went blank, just static. I tried to picture her, this Clara. Young, beautiful, someone from his work, the kind of woman who thanks him for small favors and smiles too long. My stomach turned. Mr. Hall said something about paperwork, about processes, about taking time to absorb the news. I couldn't hear any of it. My pulse drowned everything else out. When I finally walked out of that office, the winter air hit my face like glass. I stood by the car, staring at the fog my breath made, thinking, he lied to me. For 17 years, he lied to me. And beneath the anger was something worse, confusion, because I thought I knew him. Every word, every scar, every silence. But now I didn't even recognize the man I buried. Tell me in the comments, what would you do if the person you loved most left their whole life to a stranger? I drove home that day without remembering the road. The world outside my windshield was just a smear of gray. Buildings, trees, people, all ghosts passing through me. It wasn't until I found myself parked in front of the house that it all came crashing back. The house. Our house. The one that now belonged to someone named Clara Evans. I sat in the car with the engine still running, clutching the steering wheel until my fingers ached. My chest hurt in a way I didn't know hearts could hurt. Not sharp, not stinging, but heavy, unrelenting, like something inside was collapsing in slow motion. The moment I stepped inside, every object in that house turned into evidence. The couch, where he held me that night we lost our baby. The kitchen, where he kissed me from behind while I made coffee. The hallway, where he apologized after our biggest fight. And now, it all felt staged. False. Like I'd been living on a movie set built around a script I was never allowed to read. I tore through drawers, shelves, everything that was his. Photographs, receipts, old birthday cards. I ripped through his closet like a thief, pulling down clothes, digging into pockets. There had to be something. Some explanation that would make sense, some mistake to undo it all. But all I found was silence. At some point, I realized I was crying, loudly, the sound raw and animal. I sank to the floor surrounded by his shirts, my knees pressing into the soft carpet. It smelled like him again. Even in betrayal, his scent still cracked me open. That was the most infuriating part. I wanted to hate him completely, but love kept crawling back through the cracks. Later that night, I poured myself a glass of wine, then another, then another. I kept replaying that name in my head. Clara Evans. Clara Evans. It didn't fit with our life. I couldn't recall him ever saying the name. Not once. And Michael was the kind of man who overshared everything. What song was stuck in his head, what brand of paint to use, the stray dog he saw on his way to work. But Clara? She didn't exist in our story, unless she'd been hidden in the margins all along. By midnight, the glass slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. The sound snapped me out of my fog. I sat there staring at the pieces, at how easily they'd broken. That's when it hit me. Maybe I was the one who'd been fragile all along, believing his world began and ended with me. I opened his laptop. The password still worked. For hours, I dug through emails, photos, calendar notes. Nothing obvious, but a few messages caught my attention, small, coded ones. Transfers to an account I didn't recognize. Evans Fund, written in the memo line of several bank statements. My stomach tightened. I printed the statements. The pages trembled in my hands. My mind was already spinning stories, that he had a lover, that he'd been planning to leave me, That I was somehow the fool who didn't see it coming. The kind of woman everyone whispers about but no one warns. And yet, part of me still defended him. That's what love does to you, doesn't it? It makes you rewrite lies into misunderstandings, betrayal into burden. You start justifying things you shouldn't. He must have had a reason, I whispered to the empty living room. But even my voice sounded unconvinced. The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror again, the same one I'd stared into before the will reading. This time, I didn't see fear. I saw anger. Cold, steady anger. My face looked older, harder, but alive. If she was going to take everything from me, I would at least know who she was. It wasn't about the money. Not anymore. It was about truth. About looking the ghost of my marriage in the eye and asking why he decided to haunt me this way. I grabbed my coat, slipped the printed statements into my purse, and said his name out loud for the first time in days. Michael. Hearing it hurt. Saying it ripped something open again. But I needed that pain. It kept me human. Outside, the world was frozen over. The air bit at my face as I got into the car. I didn't know where to start, but I knew I couldn't sit still. I'd already lost him. I wasn't about to lose the truth, too. If you've ever felt rage and heartbreak twisted together, like grief suddenly grew claws, tell me in the comments. I want to know I'm not the only one who's loved and hated the same person in a single breath. The morning I started looking for Clara, the world felt colder than usual. Maybe it was winter creeping in, or maybe it was the chill that comes when your life stops making sense. I woke before dawn, tossed between memories that didn't fit anymore. Every time I closed my eyes, his voice came back, warm, gentle, lying by omission. Grief had melted into something else entirely. Not rage this time. Focus. Sharp and narrow like a knife's edge. I didn't eat, didn't shower. I sat by the kitchen table with Michael's laptop in front of me, the house silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. I typed her name into the search bar. Clara Evans. There were hundreds of results, social media profiles, news articles, LinkedIn pages. Clara Evans in Dallas, Clara Evans in Oregon, Clara Evans in Florida. I clicked on all of them, one by one, studying their faces. None of them looked like a threat. None of them looked like someone who could destroy a marriage with just a line on a legal document. Still, I couldn't stop scrolling. My hands were shaking. The more I searched, the more unreal the name became, like a ghost name. Something he'd invented to torment me. But then I noticed something small on one of his bank transfers, a P.O. box in Chicago. I stared at it until my vision blurred. I knew Michael had never been to Chicago for business. At least, not that he'd told me. I opened the drawer where he'd kept all his travel receipts. There they were, hotel bookings, meals, meetings, familiar cities, Denver, Austin, New York. But then, tucked behind an envelope, one new receipt, Chicago, 2 years ago. My breath caught. The date fell right after our anniversary trip. That was the night he'd cut our trip short, saying his boss needed him urgently. I remember crying in that hotel bathroom, convincing myself that's what loving a hardworking man meant, forgiving absence. Now I saw it for what it was, a lie neatly wrapped in responsibility. I grabbed my car keys without thinking. Halfway to the door, I stopped. I wasn't ready to drive to a city I'd never been to just to chase a ghost. So I did the next best thing. I called Mr. Hall. "Do you have Clara's contact information?" I asked, keeping my tone steady. He hesitated. "Elena, I'm not sure that's appropriate. That will stole my life. I have a right to know who she is." Silence stretched between us. Then his voice softened. "All I can say is that Ms. Evans lives near Chicago. She declined to attend the reading. She only sent a letter confirming receipt of the notice." A letter. My stomach tightened. "Can I see it?" He sighed again. the kind of sigh meant to comfort but laced with guilt. I shouldn't, but yes, I'll email you a copy. Please don't do anything rash. I almost laughed. Rash? My husband left me for a stranger after dying. What else is there to do but be rash? When I hung up, an email was already waiting. The subject line read, "Per request, letter from C. Evans." My hand trembled as I clicked it open. There wasn't much, just a short formal paragraph thanking the firm for handling things on her father's behalf. Father. The word echoed in my head like thunder. Could it be a mistake? Father as in godfather? Stepfather? The possibilities tumbled over each other, but my gut whispered the word I didn't want to say. Daughter. I zoomed in on the letterhead. Clara M. Evans, licensed therapist, Evanston, IL. There, finally, was something real. Proof that she existed, flesh and blood, not just a cruel mirage of grief. I stared at her printed name for a long time. A therapist. Maybe that was fitting. She'd unknowingly become the patient of my obsession, the healer of a wound she didn't even cause. As the evening light spilled through the kitchen window, I realized what I had to do. I would find her. Not to hurt her, not even to accuse her, but to look her in the eyes and understand what my husband had hidden for 17 years. Because maybe then I could bury him properly, not the man I'd married, but the man I'd never known. And so I started planning my trip to Chicago. Follow my story, because what I found on that trip changed everything I thought I knew. Faiku, the face in the photograph. I started packing for Chicago that morning, though I didn't know exactly what I was chasing. Maybe a ghost, maybe a truth sharp enough to cut the pain open and let it breathe. I threw clothes into a suitcase without thinking. Sweaters, jeans, the red scarf Michael bought me last Christmas. It still smelled faintly like his cologne, which made my throat close. I almost left it on the bed, but something in me whispered, "Take it." Maybe I just didn't want to admit how much I still needed pieces of him, even the broken ones. Before leaving, I walked through every room of the house like I was saying goodbye. The walls felt heavier that day. Each corner carried an echo of our life, quiet dinners, lazy Sundays, the kind of love that felt ordinary, eternal. All illusions now. I stopped by his office last. The room had always been off limits, his sanctuary. Even after he died, I hadn't touched much in there. But this time the air felt different. Still, uneasy. Books lined every wall. I stared at them, unsure what I was looking for, until my hand stopped on one of his favorites, To Kill a Mockingbird. The spine was worn, bent in the middle from years of reading. When I pulled it from the shelf, something slipped out and landed softly on the rug. A photograph. It wasn't framed, just an old faded print. Edges curled, colors almost gone. It showed Michael, younger, his hair darker, his smile freer. He was holding a baby girl in his arms, no more than 3 or 4. There was a woman beside him, half turned toward the camera, her arm around his waist. I didn't recognize her. She wasn't a threat, just real. She looked tired but kind. The back of the photo had 2 words scribbled in blue ink, almost rubbed out. For her. My chest tightened. Who was her? The woman? The little girl? For a moment, I convinced myself it was nothing, just another memory before me. Maybe a friend's child, an old co-worker, something innocent. That's what I told myself because the alternative, that my husband had built another life without me, was too tangled to face. I sat cross-legged on the floor, tracing his younger smile with my thumb. That smile wasn't the one I knew. This was before me, before our vows, before our home, before what I thought was everything. I needed to know who they were, desperately. The woman's face didn't mean anything to me, but the little girl's eyes. God, there was something in them. A familiarity that punched me in the gut. wide, uncertain but alive, like she was trying to memorize him. I had seen those eyes before, but where? I held the photo under the desk lamp, bringing it closer. That's when it hit me. The girl's expression, the shape of her face, I'd seen it yesterday, on Clara Evans's professional website. A small picture in the corner of her bio, the same faint dimples, the same curious sadness in her eyes. I dropped the photo. My hands went numb. The room spun, every wall closing in. My husband hadn't left his life to a stranger. He'd left it to a memory. My pulse pounded so violently that my whole body trembled. I tried to steady myself, inhaling slow. Think, Elena. There had to be more. Some note, some explanation hidden behind this ghost of an image. I tore through the shelves again, looking inside every book, behind every frame, under drawers. Paper after paper, folder after folder. Nothing. Until, behind a row of old folders, I found a yellow envelope sealed with tape. No name, no address. My fingers shook as I opened it. Inside were several handwritten letters, folded perfectly. One had my name on it, but I didn't open it. Not yet. I couldn't. My eyes were already burning, and I knew whatever he'd written could either heal me or destroy me. Maybe both. I needed time. I needed distance. I slipped the envelope into my suitcase, placed the photograph beside it, and zipped the case closed. Tomorrow, I'd be on the road to Chicago. If the girl in that photo, if Clara, was truly his daughter, I had to hear it from her lips. Not from paper. Not from ghosts. That night, I sat by the window with a glass of wine, watching snow fall against the lamplight. The photo lay on the table beside me, that little girl's innocent face staring back. Somehow, in that stillness, I felt both dread and tenderness. Because if she was his daughter, then maybe part of him still existed in her. I wanted to hate her. I truly did. But something deep inside whispered that maybe she was a victim too, just like me. It's strange how love can twist itself, reaching even through betrayal, finding something human in the ones who hurt us most. If you've ever discovered a piece of truth that shattered you but also set you free, share this with someone who might understand that feeling. Because tomorrow, everything changes. I left before the sun came up. The highway stretched ahead like a long, gray promise, or maybe a threat. I couldn't tell which. My suitcase sat in the back seat, the envelope resting on top like it was watching me. I hadn't dared open it yet. I wanted to tell myself I was saving it for the right moment, but the truth was simpler. I was afraid. Afraid that whatever was inside would confirm the worst part of me. That my marriage had been a lie built beautifully from silence. The sky was soft pink over Michigan, the kind of color he used to love pointing out during morning drives. "Look, Lena," he'd say, tilting his chin toward the sky. "Doesn't it look like forgiveness?" Funny. Now the same colors made me feel sick. Forgiveness was just another word for pretending. Hours passed. The car heater hummed. The radio whispered softly. I kept replaying his voice in my head, trying to fit this new version of him, the father, the liar, into the man I'd loved. None of it aligned. It was like holding two photographs over each other, trying to make the faces match when you know they never will. At a rest stop just outside Gary, Indiana, I finally pulled over. My hands were shaking too much to drive. I grabbed a coffee and sat inside the parked car, staring at the snow collecting on the windshield. It was so quiet it almost hurt. That's when I took the envelope from the suitcase. I unfolded it with slow, careful hands, like if I moved too quickly it might crumble. Inside, there were 3 letters stacked neatly. The first one had my name. For Elena. I held my breath and read. If you're reading this, it means I didn't get to explain everything the way I wanted. I know what I've done feels like betrayal, but it wasn't about love. It was about guilt. There's a part of my life I never told you about, and not because I wanted to lie, but because shame can grow roots deeper than honesty. My eyes blurred. The words swam. Before I met you, there was someone. We were both young, reckless, and when she found out she was pregnant, I panicked. I wasn't ready. She deserved better, and when she left, when she decided to let another family raise our daughter, I told myself it was mercy. For years, I carried that silence like a brick. Then one day, her name found me again. Clara Evans. I stopped reading. The rest of the words became shapes I couldn't look at. I pressed the paper to my chest and screamed into the empty car. The sound came out strangled, feral. He had a daughter who had grown up believing he didn't want her, and he had carried that secret while holding me, touching me, promising we never kept things from each other. I threw the letter onto the passenger seat, shaking. The warmth inside me turned to ice. I wanted to throw it out the window, burn it, erase it, but something in me wouldn't let go, because buried inside the anger was a flicker of something else. Pity, maybe. Not for him, for her. I stared at Clara's printed name on the letterhead again, that same tidy handwriting. A therapist. Someone who probably spent her whole life helping others heal while carrying a wound she didn't create. For the first time since this started, I wondered what she looked like now. Did she know about me? Did she hate him? Or worse, did she love him in spite of everything? As the car rolled back onto the highway, the snow picked up, small flakes turning thick and white. I gripped the wheel harder, watching them blur together like falling confessions. By the time I reached the Welcome to Illinois sign, my tears had finally dried. My voice came out quiet, but certain when I whispered, "I need to see her." And beneath that urgency was something unexpected. Not anger, not revenge, but the ache of unfinished love. Because maybe the truth wasn't meant to destroy me. Maybe it was meant to make me whole, in a way I never expected. Follow my story. Because the hardest part isn't what I discovered. It's what I felt when I finally saw her face. The building was smaller than I imagined, a beige brick clinic on a quiet street lined with bare winter trees. There was a metal sign by the door that read Clara M. Evans, licensed therapist. I stood outside for 10 minutes, staring at it, trying to steady my heartbeat. I had practiced a dozen versions of what I'd say to her, harsh ones, bitter ones, lines that sounded powerful in my head, the kind that would make her feel the sting she'd unknowingly caused. But now, standing there, they all dissolved, because behind that door wasn't an enemy, just a woman who had as much of Michael inside her as I once did. The receptionist looked up as I entered, her smile polite. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said, forcing a shaky breath. "But tell her there's someone here who knew her father." The woman at the desk blinked, sensing the weight in my voice, then disappeared into a hallway. I felt my knees weaken. The air felt thick, almost unbreathable. Then I heard soft footsteps approaching. When Clara appeared, something inside me cracked. She was younger than I expected, early 30s maybe, but there was something old in her eyes, a quietness that life carves into people who've known too much loss. Her hair was the same dark shade as Michael's, pulled neatly back, and for a moment, I thought I was hallucinating. Because standing there, it was like seeing him again. "Mrs. Rivers," she said gently. Her voice was calm, professional, but carried a tremor underneath. She already knew who I was. I nodded, unable to speak. My throat burned as I whispered, "You look like him." Clara blinked hard, her hand trembling slightly as she gestured toward her office. "We can talk inside." Her office was warm, soft light, muted colors, plants by the window, the kind of room built for healing. But I felt everything except peace. I sat on the couch, my palms sweating, the photograph burning in my purse like it had its own pulse. "I didn't mean for things to be this way," Clara started. Her tone carried guilt and sincerity in equal measure. When your husband passed, I didn't expect to be included in any of it. I studied her face. Every movement mirrored him, the way she tilted her chin, the careful pauses between words. He never told me, I said finally. 17 years, and he never said your name. She looked down at her hands. He wrote to me once, a few months before he died. I froze. What did he say? That he wanted to meet, she said quietly. But I couldn't. I thought, maybe it was too late. I wasn't angry, not anymore, but I didn't know how to face him. I didn't know if he wanted forgiveness or just peace of mind. And then, weeks later, I got the call from his lawyer. Her voice cracked on the last word. I felt mine do the same. I didn't expect to cry. Not here, not in front of her. But tears came anyway, uninvited and unstoppable. He left me everything except himself, I whispered. Clara hesitated, then reached across the small coffee table and placed a hand over mine. It was a careful gesture, hesitant, unsure if it would be accepted. But her touch was warm, real, grounding. I never wanted to take anything from you, she said. I don't care about his money. I just wanted to understand why he spent his life hiding from me, why loving me had to come with shame attached. Her eyes glistened, and in that moment, anger left me completely. I was looking at another version of my grief, just wearing a younger face. We sat in silence for a long while. The clock ticked softly. Snow brushed against the window pane. And for the first time, I thought maybe this wasn't about betrayal anymore. Maybe it was about two women trying to pick up what one man's fear had broken. When I finally stood to leave, Clara followed me to the door. He loved you, she said quietly. You should know that. I nodded, unable to speak. Because part of me finally believed her. If this moment touched something in you, if you've ever faced the truth about someone you loved, like this video, so I know I'm not alone in this kind of pain that still tries to heal. We met again 2 days later. I didn't plan on it, but sleep had become impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, his voice came back, half apology, half confession. So I called Clara. She sounded surprised but relieved. Come by the office, she said softly. I think we both need to finish what he started. When I arrived, she was already sitting on the same couch, a mug of tea between her hands. The warmth in the room felt different now, less foreign, almost familiar. She smiled faintly when she saw me and motioned for me to sit. On the table in front of her lay the envelope I'd brought from home, carefully opened. I didn't want to read them without you, she said. It feels like they're meant for both of us. For a moment, I just stared at the folded papers lying there. 3 letters. The first one I had read, written to me. The second addressed simply, to Clara. And the third, both our names written side by side in the same gentle handwriting. Clara opened hers first. Her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes stayed clear as she began reading aloud. Clara, you were born on a Sunday morning. I wasn't there, though I wanted to be. I told myself leaving was the kindest thing I could do, that you'd grow up without the burden of my immaturity or my fear. But the truth is simpler. I was a coward. I let guilt grow into a wall I never learned how to climb. Her voice wavered, but she kept going, each sentence a wound reopening. Your mother said you looked like me. Same eyes, same temper. She wasn't wrong. I followed your life in ways I shouldn't have, through letters your adoptive parents sent when they still could, through public records later on when I couldn't stop wondering. You have no idea how many times I almost reached out. I told myself I'd do it once I had something good to give you, stability, a name I wasn't ashamed of. But life doesn't wait. And by the time I found peace, illness had already found me. Clara stopped, a tear slipping down her cheek. I could feel my own throat tighten. She looked at me, almost apologetic. as if his words required forgiveness that belonged to both of us. "Keep reading," I whispered. "Elena doesn't know about you, and that's my greatest shame. She gave me the kind of love that could have healed us both if I'd been honest. She deserved the whole truth, but I was too afraid of losing her, afraid that my honesty would cost me another chance at family. The will was my way of forcing the two worlds I built apart to finally meet." When she finished, silence filled the room. Heavy, sacred, the kind that doesn't ask for words. I reached into the envelope and pulled out the last letter, the one that held both our names. I unfolded it carefully, the paper already soft and worn at the creases. "To you both, if life had been kinder, this letter wouldn't exist. You would know each other not as strangers, but as the two women who loved me for reasons I never deserved. I've spent my life running from pain, pretending it was strength. But love without truth is just survival, and I've survived enough. Elena, you gave me the home I never had. You saw the best in me even when I didn't. Clara, you are everything I hoped my better self could raise. Both of you are my redemption. Maybe this will hurt at first. Maybe it already does. But if I've learned anything from both your hearts, it's that love is only real when it forgives, not forgets. I hope when you find each other you don't see what I took from you. See what I left behind instead." When I finished reading, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the soft ticking of the office clock and our unsteady breath. Clara leaned back, eyes red, and whispered, "He wanted to make us hate him less." "No," I said gently. "He wanted us to love each other more." The words didn't come from logic. They came from somewhere raw. Maybe from grief, maybe from the last bit of love I still carried for him. Clara nodded, her lips trembling into a small, heartbreaking smile. Then she reached across the table again. This time I took her hand without hesitation. Warm skin, shaky fingers, two strangers connected by the same ache. In that moment, I felt something shift inside me. Not peace, not yet, but the beginning of it. If you've ever forgiven someone who didn't deserve it, not for them, but for yourself, tell me in the comments. Maybe we'll both feel a little less alone. I stayed in Chicago longer than I planned. Not out of obligation, but because leaving felt wrong, like cutting a wound before it finished bleeding. Each morning, Clara and I met for coffee, awkward at first, but with each sip, the silence between us softened. We spoke mostly about him, not the man who lied, but the fragments of him we had both loved in different ways. She told me about her childhood, her adoptive parents, how she studied psychology to understand people like her father, people who disappear without really leaving. There was gentleness in the way she spoke about him, as though she'd decided early that empathy was easier than bitterness. I envied that. I, on the other hand, was still learning how to carry his memory without letting it crush me. Every story she told became a mirror, showing me parts of Michael I never met but somehow recognized. The same crooked humor, the same patience when teaching, the same habit of biting his lip when thinking. He had passed pieces of himself into both of us, like two lives running parallel until grief forced them to meet. One night, we sat by the lake. The city was quiet, snow drifting softly across the water. I asked her, "Do you hate him?" She took a long breath before answering. "Some days I want to, but mostly I just wish I'd met him sooner, because then, maybe both of you would have had more time." I nodded. The cold air made my eyes sting. "He lied," I said, "and yet, I can't stop missing him." "That's the thing about love," she whispered. "It doesn't need permission to stay." Her words sank deep. I realized then that forgiveness isn't about saying the pain was okay. It's about deciding not to let it control the rest of your life. The next day, I visited Michael's grave for the first time since the will reading. Clara came with me. We didn't speak the whole drive. The hum of the car filled the silence better than words could. When we arrived, the cemetery was bathed in early light. Snow covered the ground like a clean sheet, unmarked, forgiving. His name was carved into the stone, simple and final. I stood there, tracing the letters with my glove, my chest a knot of love and anger. I whispered, "You should have trusted us." Clara knelt beside me, placing a small white rose at the base of his headstone. "He's probably listening," she said softly, regretting every word he didn't say. I smiled, though it hurt. That sounds like him. For a long time, we stood in silence, two women bound by a man who broke them both, and somehow also bound by what he left behind, understanding. It wasn't dramatic or loud, just quiet acceptance, the kind that feels like breathing for the first time after drowning. On the way back, I thought about the house waiting for me. Our house. That wasn't just his anymore. The place I had nearly turned into a shrine of anger. Maybe now I could let light back in. Maybe I could repaint the walls, change the curtains, rebuild it as something new. Not a tomb for our love, but the beginning of my own life. Clara was silent beside me, her head leaning against the window. I felt protective of her, as if by loving her, I could give him a chance to be remembered with more kindness than he earned. When we reached her apartment, she hugged me tightly, the kind of hug that feels final, but somehow eternal too. "Thank you for not hating me," she whispered. "I never hated you," I said. "I just didn't know how to stop hating him." She smiled, eyes glistening, and in that moment, I understood. Forgiveness wasn't something to give once and be done with. It was something I'd keep choosing, day after day, until the pain stopped asking for attention. As I drove away, the Chicago skyline fading in my rearview mirror, I whispered a silent promise. To love what remained, even if it came wrapped in sorrow. If you've ever learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting, share this with someone who needs that reminder today. When I returned home, the house looked different. Not in the way that furniture shifts or colors fade, but in how grief changes the air around things. It wasn't haunted anymore. It was quiet, yes, but not hostile. Like it had been holding its breath all this time, waiting for me to walk back through the door and finally exhale. I stood in the doorway with my suitcase in hand, the dust motes swirling in the golden afternoon light. Everything was exactly as I'd left it. Yet the heaviness had softened. The place felt smaller somehow, but in a comforting way. Like the walls had grown closer to keep me company instead of closing in to suffocate me. I walked through each room slowly. The living room where we shared late-night movies, the kitchen where he'd tease me about burning toast, the hallway where I once screamed his name through tears. This time, I didn't flinch at the memories. I let them come, every one of them, not as punishments, but as proof that I had lived something real, something flawed, something that mattered. On the table by the window still sat the photograph I'd found. Michael younger, holding Clara as a child. For the first time, I didn't see betrayal in that image. I saw regret, fear, and love. Complicated, imperfect love. The kind that breaks everything open and still finds a way to mean something. I framed the photo that day. Put it on the mantel beside one of me and Michael on our wedding day. Two truths, side by side, not competing, just existing. That night, I built a fire in the fireplace. The room flickered with orange warmth, and for the first time in months, I felt a kind of peace that didn't feel borrowed. I poured myself a glass of his favorite wine, sat on the couch, and let the silence settle. Not as an enemy this time, but as a friend who finally knew when to speak and when not to. I didn't need to erase him to move on. I just needed to stop carrying everything he never said. Some parts of love aren't meant to be understood, only felt and forgiven. A few days later, a small envelope arrived in the mail. No sender. Inside was a photograph of Clara standing by a lake, the same one we'd visited. On the back, she had written in careful, steady handwriting, "For her. C." The same words that were written on the back of the old photo. I ran my fingers over them and smiled through tears. That word, her, had changed meaning over time. It wasn't just about the girl in the picture anymore. It was about me, too. About all the women who love, lose, and learn to keep living. That night, I opened the window. The winter air rushed in, crisp and honest. I felt him there, not as a ghost, but as a memory finally laid to rest. I whispered, "Goodbye, Michael." Then, softer still, "And thank you, because despite everything, he'd given me something I didn't know I needed, the chance to rebuild, to see life beyond what broke me." The next morning, I moved the framed photo to the bedside table. I wanted to wake up seeing both images, not to mourn, but to remember that healing isn't linear. It stumbles, like we do, but it keeps going. The sun rose through the window, filling the room with quiet warmth. For the first time, it didn't hurt to be alive. If you followed me this far, thank you. Share this if you believe that sometimes the people who break us are the ones who teach us how to begin again.